Thank you for joining us today. This is our third and final webinar in the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration series. Today we're going to be talking about CSA and BASICs. I'll explain what those acronyms need here in a minute. But we've just been absolutely thrilled with the response that we've had to these webinars. So we really, really appreciate you taking your time out of your busy schedules to learn a little bit about how you can improve some of these things at your companies. So once again, a little bit about Relion. We have offices located throughout Eastern Iowa, including Iowa City, Iowa Falls, Kelowna, Muscatine, and we've just recently added Victor and Williamsburg offices. We do offer a wide array of insurance products, including personal lines, so your home, auto, personal auto, and umbrella needs, commercial lines, again, property, liability, auto, work comp, financial services, and then value-added services as well. This is a great example of one of those value-added services, us presenting these webinars to you. I've been with Relion almost 2 years, but I've been doing this line of work for several years, delivering loss control and risk management services to commercial insurance clients throughout Eastern Iowa. I really love working with you and your organizations, from leadership to those in charge of safety and compliance, to even getting in front of your employees to solve problems, to deliver training, those types of things. I do a lot of OSHA compliance, some DOT compliance, as well as safety and workers' comp best practices, all with the goal of reducing risk for our clients and saving them money on their insurance. I am a certified outreach trainer for OSHA 10 and 30 hour in construction. We actually have a class coming up over the next 2 days, which is full, but just another great example of one of the value adds that we offer here at Relion. Today, we're going to talk about a couple of things related to the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration. We're going to talk about CSA, their basics, and then their safety measurement system. All of this information is visible to you as motor carriers or contractors, and I'll show you how to access some of that information, how to manage it, and then we'll talk about best practices as well. And as always, we'll close with some resources and related services from Relion. First, we're going to talk about CSA, which is it's the FMCSA's, the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration's Safety and Compliance Enforcement Program. It launched in 2010, and it uses data to monitor the safety record of registered motor carriers in the United States. The CSA is important for all motor carriers, including owner-operators, as well as for hire and those in commerce, because it uses data to identify, prioritize, and unfortunately sometimes intervene with large truck and bus carriers, so those transporting people as well, who might pose a risk to others on the roadways. FMCSA analyzes data from 3.5 million roadside inspections each year, as well as 100,000 crash reports. That includes all violations, any investigations that they might conduct, crash reports going back from the last 2 years, and we'll take a look at some of that data. And again, how you can manage yours. Your driver's performance is included in your record. So your drivers are really a reflection of your company on the road. So it's really important that you understand and follow the CSA program, which does stand for Compliance, Safety, and Accountability. So again, your company's performance will appear online in the FMCSA's Safety Measurement System. We'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. That data is updated once a month, and it includes information related to your drivers, any vehicle violations, crash reports, etc., over the last 2 years, as well as investigation results. They organize that data into what we call BASICs, which stands for Behavior, Analysis, and Safety Improvement categories. You'll see those identified here, and again, we'll dig a little bit more into those basics here as we go through this morning. The purpose of the CSA is really to improve motor carrier and driver safety and hold drivers accountable for their on-road performance. We'll also help address safety problems before dangerous commercial motor vehicles or drivers even get on the road, and with the goal of reducing the number of accidents, injuries, and fatalities involving commercial motor vehicles. You know, as I mentioned, I've been doing this job for several years, and unfortunately, I've worked on some pretty catastrophic CMV claim cases, you know, with fatalities, both on the carrier side as well as folks in the general public. And it's really, really devastating to, you can imagine any of the parties involved. But it's really to make the nation's roads safer for commercial drivers and other motorists on the road. There are over 5 million truck and bus drivers who share the road with more than 250 million motorists. That's a lot of people on the roads in this country. That's a lot of people to keep safe. It does take a lot of responsibility ensuring that your drivers, that your vehicles, and other motorists on the road do stay safe. And again, this presentation is designed to help you do just that. It'll give you an overview of the elements of the CSA, including the safety measurement system and the basics, and we'll also show you how to check your data and provide you with the tools and resources you need to improve your safety and compliance. So how the CSA scoring works is pretty simple. They measure motor carriers' performance under each one of the basics that we're going to talk about in a little bit here. You'll be assigned a score, and that scoring will prioritize riskier fleets for intervention. So that means maybe you'll get a warning letter, maybe you'll be subject to an investigation by the FMCSA, and ultimately resulting in fines. The scores are based upon both roadside, on-site, and off-site inspection results, and are reflected as a percentage rank from 0 to 100. The higher number percentile is a worse safety performance. So as we look through this, as you look at your data, keep that in mind. The closer you are to 100 means we have a lot to improve on and correct out there. And then once a violation has been categorized, it's weighted on both time and severity. And again, we'll look at that a little bit more. But here's a scoring example. This just shows a motor carrier measured over, again, the past 24 months. And again, we'll dig a little bit deeper into this, but this is one of the things that you look at when you go out and look at your data. As I mentioned, there is a time and severity weighting. So the more recent the crash, the more impact it will have on your scores. Violations are rated triple, for example, if they occurred between now and 6 months ago. They are weighted double if they occurred between 6 months and 12 months ago. And then they'll just have a single weight if they occurred between 12 and 24 months ago. Violations will drop off your record and out of the system if they occurred more than 24 months ago. And we'll take a look at an example of that. So essentially, violations that could increase the likelihood of future crashes, like reckless driving, are weighted heavier as well. So if that violation was severe enough to warrant an out of service, it's going to be assigned additional points. So here's an example of what that might look like. If you received a violation for not wearing a seatbelt, and it has been 4 months since you received that violation, it's going to receive a time weight of 3 times that. The violation points for not wearing a seatbelt is 7, so you get your total weighted points at 21 points. Likewise, a handheld cell phone, 8 months, we're just going to weight that at 2 times, but that gets you a 10-point severity violation, which will weight that at 20 points. Speeding 6 to 10 over, 20 months out, that's just a one-time time weight. That's a 4-point violation, and then your weighted total points will be 4. The safety management system and basics. So the safety management system, or the SMS, assesses motor carriers' safety compliance and identifies carriers for interventions using, again, that roadside violation, inspection, and crash data. So that means that each year, from those 3.5 million roadside inspections that I mentioned, and crash reports, that feeds into this system to identify both non-compliant and at-risk carriers. As I mentioned, the SMS assesses carriers based upon 24 months of crash data and considers the number of violations such as speeding, fatigued driving, crashes, as well as severity of violations or crashes. Again, they update that once a month, and that data is going to be reflective of the 24 months past, and they're going to categorize each of the violations into one of the basic categories. So again, the basics will help you understand where you're having safety problems so that you can correct them. So for example, unsafe driving, crash indicator, hours of service, etc. When we look at your data here shortly, you will be able to understand where you're really having the majority of your violations coming out of. That way, maybe that's what you focus on for the short term. Maybe it's vehicle maintenance. Maybe you're getting 20 or 50% or more of your violations are in the vehicle maintenance basic. Well, that might tell you as an operator that we really need to focus on pre-trip inspections and putting good operating vehicles on the road. FMCSA for each basic does set what they call an intervention threshold. So that means that if a carrier is scoring at or above this threshold, again, in percentage, interventions like that warning letter I mentioned, or if you don't improve, an on-site inspection might occur. So we'll take a look at the basics, some of the types of violations you might find in each one of those basics, and then we'll also look at the intervention threshold depending on what type of carrier you are. The unsafe driving basic, the purpose of that one is to prevent dangerous and careless operation of commercial motor vehicles. That's pretty self-explanatory. There are over 40 potential violations under the unsafe driving basic. Things like speeding tickets, reckless driving, not properly changing lanes, so not using turn signals, inattentiveness, failing to wear a seatbelt. Those are some of the most severe types of infractions and violations that you might receive. So when we talk about that intervention threshold for the unsafe driving basic, and again, I'll show you some visuals that will kind of help bring this all together here shortly. The intervention threshold for the unsafe driving basic for just general carriers is 65%. For passenger carriers, that drops down to 50%. And then if you're transporting hazardous materials, that threshold is 60%. The hours of service basic, that aims to prevent drivers from operating a CMV if they are ill, fatigued, or not complying with hours of service regulations. Again, that intervention threshold is 65% for general, 50 for passenger, and 60 for hazmat carriers. The vehicle maintenance basic will address issues like not doing inspections, vehicle maintenance issues, shifting loads and load securement, spilled or dropped cargo, and then overloading of a commercial motor vehicle. The intervention threshold for general carriers is 80%, for passenger carriers 65%, and then for hazmat it's 75%. The controlled substance and or alcohol basic is really there to prevent the operation of a commercial motor vehicle by drivers who are impaired. Could be by alcohol, could be illegal drugs, or even sometimes the misuse of prescription or over-the-counter medications. As you see with this one, because it can be very dangerous, those intervention thresholds are significantly higher. So even if you're at 80% for general carriers, 65 for passengers, or 75 for hazmat carriers. Driver fitness, this is looking for drivers who are unfit to operate a commercial motor vehicle. Could be due to lack of training, experience, medical qualifications, So examples of violations under this basic might be failing to have a valid CDL, being medically unqualified to operate that CMV, and then finally, motor carriers not maintaining their driver qualification files. And that's something that when I go in and talk to a lot of folks that have CDL drivers who may be required to maintain driver qualification files, that's one thing that gets missed a lot. And it's paperwork. It can be a lot of work, but it's also very, very important. So that's where that would fit, is under the driver fitness basic. The threshold for intervention for driver fitness is 80 for general carriers, 65 for passengers, and 75 for hazmats. And then we have the crash indicator basic. That determines how a motor carrier stacks up compared to other carriers with a similar number of safety events, so inspections, violations, or crashes. And that information comes from state reported crashes that meet certain criteria and standards, but this is not publicly available. So when we go out to the SMS here shortly, because I don't have a carrier login, I won't be able to see that on you or any other carrier. But you should be able to view your own information as far as the crash indicator goes. The intervention threshold, 65 for general, 50 for passenger, and 60 for hazmat. Hazardous materials is also one that's not publicly available. Again, that I don't have access to, or the general public doesn't have access to. But this one addresses the FMCSA, which is the motor carrier safety regulations. It identifies the part there, as well as hazardous material regulations. If you want to look up these parts in the Code of Federal Registry, you're welcome to do that. I don't work with a lot of folks transporting hazardous materials, but if you have a login, you can go in there and find that. But the intervention threshold for hazardous materials, no matter the type of carrier that you are, is 80%. So as I mentioned, you can review your own data in the safety measurement system. This just kind of shows you what you're able to see as a logged in carrier and what you're able to see as a member of the general public. As I mentioned, me as a member of the general public, I can view all of the basic information for all carriers except hazardous materials and the crash indicator basics. As well as I'm not allowed to see drivers' names. And I'll show you again an illustration of that. If you're logged in as a carrier, so if you have a US DOT number and you're logged in as that carrier, you can see all of that information, including the hazardous materials, the crash indicator, as well as drivers' names per inspection. And then you can also download inspection and crash data. So here's an example of what you might see. This is a public view because I don't have a USDOT login, but this is an example. When I go out and look for ABC Trucking, this is what I'm going to see on the main page. I'll see their DOT number, where they're operating out of, both address to the state, how many vehicles they have, as well as drivers, and the number of inspections that they've had, again, in that 24-month period. I can also see safety rating and out of service rates for both the vehicle and the driver. Again, I don't have the public view to see their hazmat data. So a lot of times when I'll go to do an introductory meeting with a client, maybe it's a new client, maybe it's a client I haven't been in front of before, or maybe it's one that the producer has indicated needs some help in this area. This is the first place that I'll go to kind of see where your standing is. And this will help me help you implement some of these strategies for bringing some of these scores down. So you'll see the out of service rate for this particular company is nearly 70%. So that means they've got a lot of work to do. And again, we can dig in to some of this here shortly. The yellow triangle with the exclamation point is going to tell me that this carrier is exceeding the intervention threshold. So if you ever see this on your record, there's a pretty good chance you're going to get an inspection coming up. Now, I will tell you that the FMCSA with COVID and such, I don't believe they're doing a lot of on-site inspections. I'm not saying they're not doing any. A lot of them might be over email. They might want to see records, documentation, that type of stuff. And vehicle maintenance is one of those. They really can do by looking through your vehicle maintenance records, your pre-trip inspections, and so on. But we'll come back to this. I'm going to go out actually to the website here shortly and take a closer look at this. As we scroll down the page, I'm on the vehicle maintenance basics, so it's going to show me data based upon, again, the last 24 months to see that information. You can click to see how, again, those measurements are calculated and how it relates to percentile, et cetera. This will give you the percentage threshold, the intervention threshold. So again, we've got the yellow triangle. I'm in the 98th percentile for this one. I am very likely going to get an inspection or an investigation. If you've had an investigation, you can see any results from that displayed down here as well. Okay, so I pulled this particular carrier up. I wanted to make sure that I stayed away from anybody that might be on this call or that you might know. This particular carrier is out of Montclair, California. It's called LAC Trucking. Again, we've already seen the screenshot of this information. Their driver out of service, their vehicle out of service percentage is 25.6 in drivers. And then they'll show the national average. So you can kind of see and compare yourselves to others. There's a little bit of licensing and insurance information. This is an active for-hire authority carrier. I don't know, we've got a few of those on this call here. But as I showed you earlier, this is where you're going to see some on-road performance detail, investigations, etc. And you can scroll down and see all of the violation summary. As you can see, this particular carrier has a lot of violations over the past 24 months. A lot of them, this is where I would come out and I would say, okay, we probably need to take a look at your vehicle maintenance processes, policies, etc., because that's where I'm seeing the vast majority of the violations. Once we address that, we're probably going to want to look at hours of service compliance. And of course, unsafe driving is always an issue out there too. What I like to do, the first place I'll go, this is all great information, but I like spreadsheets where I can sort data, where I can really analyze it and even add my own columns to kind of manage some of this data. So I like to download this information, and I would absolutely encourage you all to do that as well, because it will download into an Excel spreadsheet, which means I can really dig into this data, and I'll show you what that looks like. So we've got several tabs here. The first one is just a violation summary. It's going to kind of break it out by the basics, etc. Okay. Then it's going to show me, and this is the tab I really, really use quite often if I'm getting ready to go see one of my clients and we really need to address some of this FMCSA stuff. I go to the inspections tab, and what this will show me is full 24 months prior, all of the inspections that I as a motor carrier, I as a commercial motor vehicle company has had over that last 24 months. So you'll see it stops here in August of 2019. Again, these folks have had quite a bit. It'll tell me the state that the violation occurred, It'll just give a violation number, the level of inspection. So did they do a full comprehensive inspection? Did they just pull you over for because they noticed your brake lights were out? So they do certain levels of these inspections. It will indicate whether or not there was a placarded hazardous material vehicle inspection. Hazardous material inspection. So now we're going to get over into the basics and which basics were violated. So we go back over here and we look at November 29th of 2020. You'll see that this particular stop had 2 violations. So as we scroll across here, I got a driver fitness violation and an hours of service compliance violation. It's going to narrow it down a little bit more for me, saying that it was license related and the driver had an incomplete or wrong log. And what's really great is if you don't understand the particular violation or the code related to it, it will indicate that here. So you can go out to the FMCSA's website and really educate yourself on that violation so that you don't have repeat violations. Maybe you can use it as a training tool or a learning lesson for your company and your drivers. And then it'll really break it down even more by giving that violation a description. So in this case, he or she was driving a commercial motor vehicle while their CDL was suspended for a non-safety related reason in their state of issuance, and they did not have any electronic logging devices or no record of duty status, which is a requirement. And then it will tell me a little bit more about that violation. In this case was either the vehicle or the driver put out of service. In the ELD example, yes. Or were they convicted of a different charge? A different charge could be a DUI, vehicular homicide. Was there something else that they were charged with? And then here's that violation time and weight severity. So we saw the points in that chart that I showed. So if you don't have your record of duty status or your ELDs, that's considered pretty severe. So there's that severity weight, and then the time weight, because again, this one just happened within the last few months. It's going to tell me how many basic violations per inspection. And it's going to get more into vehicle details, units that were being driven, the state that they're licensed in, VIN numbers, etc. And if you download this from your data, I'm pretty sure this is where it'll have the driver information as well. I would highly encourage you to do that. So let me just make sure. Okay, so what can you do as an employer, as a motor carrier, to improve your scores, to keep yourself from getting those violations, from getting an intervention, from increasing insurance premiums? Well, again, monitor that information. I would encourage you, depending on how many vehicles you have out there that would be subject to roadside inspections and roadside inspections, I would encourage you maybe quarterly, definitely yearly, go out there, monitor this information, including downloading that spreadsheet. And again, understand where you're receiving those violations. Sometimes when you get a ticket, maybe a driver will come in and say, hey, I got this ticket. I don't know what your policy is, if they're required to pay that themselves and you never see it, or if you as a motor carrier will pay it. Sometimes when you occasionally get violations brought in, it's really hard to monitor and remember where you're experiencing those violations. So I would highly recommend that you download this spreadsheet. You've got all of that information in one place. And then again, that way you're only looking at the information that you need to know. Again, anything prior to 24 months is not really relevant when we're talking about this. So it's a really great snapshot. Develop fleet policies, have a distracted driving policy, have some expectations so that your drivers know what you expect of them. Do you expect them to conduct pre-trip inspections? Do you have any disciplinary action or disciplinary steps for receiving violations? We can help with some of that stuff. We can customize them to suit your operations. And I've had a couple of carriers that are starting to implement incentive programs. Maybe we don't discipline them. Maybe we incentivize them. If they've had a clean roadside inspection, think about giving $100 or a $50 gift card to that particular driver because they did what they were supposed to do. Clearly, they probably did their pre-trip inspection. They were driving safe out there. They were complying with, maybe it's hours of compliance, whatever that is. Consider an incentive program. Maybe it's at the employee level, but maybe it's at the company level. If we can go a whole year with clean inspections, we're going to do this for you. Employees need to be incentivized sometimes, unfortunately, but fortunately, to follow the rules, to do what they're supposed to do. Maybe you incentivize them for submitting those pre-trip inspections so that you have visibility, so that who's ever doing maintenance, so that you know what attention these vehicles need before you're putting them out on the road. So maybe there's a small incentive for submitting those pre-trip inspections. And then conduct driver training. I think it's really, really important that the drivers understand these basics, what they might receive violations for, at what time is the employer or motor carrier going to receive an intervention. I just think it's really important for them to understand what we're talking about here, because a lot of times they don't have visibility to this stuff. Doing a safe driving training is always a good idea. I think we all think we're really, really good drivers, and most of us are. But just those reminders, those refreshers can really start to change behaviors. And then train them on how to conduct those vehicle inspections. I think it was last week already. We had an officer from the Motor Vehicle Enforcement with Iowa DOT talking about inspections and kind of giving you as operators insight into what they're looking for. But it's really also important for those employees to have that. What am I going to get pulled over for? What do I need to be looking for? Those types of things. So I think those are giving those drivers that type of information. I think they would be appreciative of that as well. So why is this all important? Well, of course, there's FMCSA and DOT compliance, avoiding fines, reducing fines and violations. That's absolutely important. But also commercial auto rates, for those of you that have visibility to your commercial auto rates, that they've been trending up for the last few years, sometimes through no fault of our own. Even your personal, if you look at your personal auto rates, those have been trending up as well. There's just a lot of distracted driving incidents out there. There's just a lot of people on the roads, and accident costs are increasing, whether it's increased medical costs or vehicle repair costs. Some of these vehicles have just so many safety features and just lots of things that can be costly to repair on them now. And then again, something that you're all familiar with is that commercial drivers are hard to come by, especially really, really good ones right now. So there's a lot of things that play in here, as well as litigation trends. Again, we're a litigious society now. I can almost guarantee you that if you are involved in some type of an accident and your company is at fault, yes, your commercial auto is going to kick in and it's going to cover bodily harm and vehicle repairs of the other driver. But if you've got a big sign on the side of that truck that says, "I'm with ABC Trucking," people unfortunately are going to be more likely to sue on top of that for additional damages. And I think it's really important to know that insurance carriers, so when we are quoting or doing renewal processes for your commercial auto policies, a lot of the underwriters will go out there. You saw how easy it was for me to find this information. They will go out there and review this information and use it in determining premiums, because that's going to tell them if you're a high risk for them. So they need to increase premiums to kind of offset any losses that might occur. So that's really important that you know that, and people can look at this. Really, drivers who you may be considering hiring could go out there if they're, educated about this system and how it works, and they want to know that they're going to work for a carrier that takes this stuff very, very seriously, and it's very important to them. And again, just good vehicle inspection and maintenance practices can help reduce losses. And as I mentioned, keep your commercial auto rates as flat as possible. Yes, I said they've been trending up the last few years. Yes, you're going to have that just by default. But if you can keep those as flat as possible, that can really help your bottom line as an employer. So I just want a little bit of a disclosure here. This presentation was a brief overview of the CSA and the SMS, as well as the basics that we talked about. The FMCSA's website has lots of really, really great information, from regulations to training, and lots of fact sheets, training materials. They do a really, really good job of putting stuff out there for you to access. Again, if anyone has any questions or wants more detail on any of this stuff, we can go back out and look at the website if you'd like to, but please go ahead and feel free to type that information or your question into the chat. So as I mentioned, we do have some related services that we can assist you with in kind of managing your data that's out there. That can include assistance with developing and implementing those fleet safety policies that I mentioned, safe driving training for employees. We can give you information, we can give you PowerPoints, we can do them on site. I don't remember if I mentioned this last week when Officer Feld was on, but the Iowa DOT is a great resource, and they're a free resource. If you're willing to bring somebody in and really have a visual, have them train on vehicle inspections. I don't know if you saw it when he was switching to a different topic. Somebody had asked a question last week, and their slideshow is 200 and some, I think 20 or 40 slides. They can really talk about anything that you want them to talk about. They can talk about load securement. They can talk about hours of service, any of these basics. They do a really, really good job, and we're fortunate to have them as a resource. We have training. I'll show you one of these here in a minute. We have training on basics and vehicle inspections in other related topics. And then we can help develop incentive programs. That's not a one-stop, one size fits all incentive program. We would do something that works for you and your drivers. Some drivers and companies have different needs because of culture, who their employees are. We can help develop that. And then just general consultation and questions. So as you can imagine, after the last couple of weeks that we've been doing these, there's been, following the sessions, I've had several questions, people wanting really good clarification. So after the very first session, when Cheryl talked about the clearinghouse, I had a few clients who really still didn't quite understand if, based upon the vehicles they operated, where they went, and so on, they really were not clear if they needed to be in the clearinghouse. And I was able to get them in touch with some of these trucking resources, DOT, Iowa Motor Truck Association, and really help get them the answers that they needed for that. So I mentioned some related resources and training. As you can see here, we have training topics on all of the basics. So this one is just illustrating the unsafe driving training, the driver presentation. So this particular presentation is geared to your drivers. And on this specific topic, the unsafe driving basic. And then we have guides for all of these basics. So this would be more of an employer facing resource. You know, how can I go out there and improve specifically my controlled substances and alcohol scores? I've got one of these documents for all of the different basics that we talked about. Toolbox talks on the hours of service basic. So tips to help keep those scores low. And then a driver's guide to roadside inspection. So what should you expect? The who's who, Department of Transportation, the FMCSA, you know, who's involved in that. And then it talks a little bit about the levels of inspection as well. And then, of course, I think many of you are familiar, we have other resources and services available here at Relion, from employee handbooks and safety manuals, whether you need a new one or yours just needs a new set of eyes to take a look, a quick audit, fork truck certifications, safety training materials, or we can deliver that on site. And then, you know, facility or job site safety audits. I, once again, want to thank you guys. I hope that you found these 3 sessions valuable and helpful. If you want any of these resources to really dig into some of these driver training and CSAs and basics, please feel free to reach out. I'm happy to send those over to you. Thanks again for joining us, and hopefully we'll find another set of 3 topics in a few months here to have another webinar series on. But I hope you all stay safe and well out there. Thank you.